Once upon a time, long, long ago, there existed a book. One which detailed the exploits of a valiant hero whose silly, wacky stretch abilities helped liberate people from their suffering by delivering laughter to their faces. This is the story of a man named Joy Boy, the laugh tale they call One Piece.
この物語はフィクションである。貴君の現実に存在する人物、思想、事象とは無関係だ。
Wealth, fame, power, everything in this world can be attained, and yet some would see this not as a bounty to be shared, but as a resource to monopolize. It is this very greed that led our world into the deep darkness of a long night it yet sleeps in. Over a millennia ago, our world lay divided and fragmented, torn asunder by struggle and inequality. Despite the many varied races that inhabited it, there was one that possessed the strongest advantage there can be: numbers. And so the humans took advantage of their numbers to take hold of power and make them the dominating species of the planet. Yet even among them, they found ways to divide each other, until some clutched the power at the top, while all others suffered beneath them. Peoples of other races, peasants, and prisoners had no choice but to escape, yet those who could not, like the Tontatta, fell to slavery, treated as nothing more than tools to fuel the wealth and power of the human kings who stood at the top. So horrible were the deeds of these kings that those who suffered under them began referring to these cruel tyrants with the moniker of devils. Some fled to the seabed below, some on unreachable peaks, but others took to the skies. Folk who had been blessed with wings, which some called angels, fled the troubled lands of the world below for the celestial body that is the moon, where they developed a civilization that could remain undisturbed by the troubles below. This was the moon capital of Burka, where the angels were able to quickly develop and generate industrialization, reaching a technology far more advanced than anything that came prior. However, in their quest for science, they came upon a critical problem. Creation of energy required the primal source, fire. But to achieve fire, natural resources were needed, the likes of which were simply not available on the barren wasteland that was the moon. As such, left with a lack of resources to propel their technology, the angels of the moon had no other choice but to return to the blue planet below to further their research. Once descended over time, the angels split into tribes in search of different places to inhabit across the seas. Some of them discovered how to use their scientific prowess to alter the density of a substance known as spiral blowing, allowing them to turn clouds into solid land, sky islands, on which some of them settled upon to keep away from the humans. However, another subset of angels decided to locate themselves somewhere else entirely, but still somewhere high above the tides and far away from humans. They built their settlement atop the Red Wall, the titanic continent surrounding the World Tree that was known as the Sun Tree Eve, whose length spanned the entire Red Wall all the way from the sunlight at the top to the roots where Fishman Island lay. This tree brought bountiful nature along with it, providing a veritable Garden of Eden atop the Red Wall, providing natural resources that could develop the technology of the angels even further. Their quest for knowledge advanced, until one day a certain scientist made a groundbreaking discovery, one that would have veritably changed the history of the world. They realized the existence of the bloodline elements, a genetic code that exists within all living beings, essentially the blueprints of life. If potentially the angels could find a way to modify the bloodline elements through genetic alterations, then they could quite possibly allow their people to evolve far beyond any other creature. It was very nearly a step into the realm of godhood. And so they eventually did, learning how to bend and alter the bloodline elements of their future children to allow their descendants to slowly evolve into genetically superior creatures. They made their skin as tough as steel, attaining a dark color to the point that normal attacks could not harm them. They gained massive black wings that, unlike other angels, actually allowed them to soar through the skies. They gained pure white hair and red eyes, a symbol of strength and unbridled power. And most importantly of all, they gained the ability to self-ignite and generate flames with their bodies. Through this self-ignition, they could circumvent the biggest hurdle that impeded their advancement of science. They essentially now had an unlimited resource at hand, an undying flame allowing them to power all of their technology without limits. Through these advancements, these angels became the strongest form of humanity in all the history of the sea, genetically superior creatures. People began to call them the Lunaria, those who brought blessings from the moon, and due to their lack of understanding of this technology, many people created legends around them, treating them like heavenly beings who had descended from the heavens to the planet below to bring judgment upon the greedy humans. People began to venerate them as gods, be it out of admiration or fear, and the settlement they had built atop the Red Wall came to be known as the God Country. But despite their unprecedented might, the Lunaria could not yet circumvent the issue of numbers. While their strength was enough to drive invaders away from their home, it was not enough to protect others beyond their kin. And such power in their hands helped nothing but to attract the envy of many. However, this is where our story would take a critical turning point, as the protagonist of this tale would finally take the stage. The titular protagonist of our story was a young boy of no particular remark who was simply known by the name of Nika, but he was a boy of lofty ambitions who had a grand dream he wanted to accomplish. Story goes that to make this dream a reality, he had set to sea as a pirate in search of freedom, and in his travels he made steadfast friends with people all around the world, adding new members to his crew and forming strong bonds with kingdoms all across, no matter who they were. You see, Nika was an odd fellow, for he did not care what his friends looked or were like, and instead wished to be friends with people from the entire world. In his grand adventure, he challenged and took down many of the tyrants that oppressed the lands he visited to bring liberation to everyone, taking all the wealth, fame, and power he attained it, not for himself, but to share it with all. Onlookers would remain stunned at Nika's ridiculously wild and stretchy powers, yet the sight of them could not help but bring laughter to their faces. Wherever he went, whichever civilization he touched, Nika would always bring cheer and joy with him, to the point he came to be known by the nickname of Joy Boy. He loved partying and music, singing a certain song that he always loved, beating to the rhythm of his drums, to the point that his infectious joy and optimism endeared all those who heard of him. Nika indeed had lofty ambitions. The boy did not just attain to attain complete freedom, but he wanted to also share that liberation to all people of the world, and he believed that he could put an end to all the pain, strife, conflict, and suffering if he only could make his ultimate dream a reality. To throw the biggest party in the world, a party with the entire world, and thus to connect everyone, as he himself always put it, into one piece. Nika believed that if he could get the entire world's population to dance, sing, and laugh together to the rhythm of his funny song, such joy could connect them in a bond of friendship and brotherhood that will help them put their differences aside. Those who heard and read of his tales and exploits simply laughed at his dream, deeming it nothing more than a childish fantasy and a ridiculous ideal, and yet the pure heart behind this ideal and message, legitimately believing that such a dream could bring an end to all the strife and division that plagued the world, inspired all those who heard of it to the point that they actually wanted to make Nika's dream a reality. So powerful was the message of Joy Boy's story that several kingdoms and countries all across the world came together and pledged an allegiance to make Nika's vision become reality. All these different races, kingdoms, and countries came together to form a single power, an immense kingdom that quite veritably stretched across the entire world. This kingdom was immense, but not in a sense that it was physically big, but that its allies were people scattered and spread all over the world. A kingdom of pirates that wanted to connect the whole world into one piece by making the ideals of the one who had inspired them, Nika, a reality. Inspired by the figure of Nika, the peoples that formed the immense kingdom began to lend their help to each other, and chief among those allies were the Lunaria of the God Country, who pledged to make use of their advanced technology to aid their friends. One of those allies was the Kolsky clan of the Wano country, who suffered in their nation under the current ruling emperor, the Ethan Baron family, who commanded Wano with an iron grip to the suffering of its inhabitants. Emperor Nasuzuro possessed mighty forces and was a fearsome combatant himself, wielding a legendary blade crafted by none other than the legendary swordsmith Kitetsu. However, with the help of all their allies, the Kolsky clan were able to bring liberation to the Wano country, driving the Ethan Baron family away and establishing a shogunate that would ensure the country's citizens could lead free lives. News of this conflict terrorized the devil tyrants across the world, for they feared that people would keep rebelling and then their heads may be next. However, though the people of the God Country had been assisting their allies with their technology, they ran into a considerable issue, being that without their perennial flames native to their tribe, their allies could not power any of their machinery. Genetically augmenting other races would take too long of a process, so they tried to replicate these effects in a faster way by creating a drug they called energy steroids, which could allow others to attain the strength of the Lunaria in a short period of time, attaining the same white hair and red eyes. However, this drug backfired as it caused the genetic code of the user to evolve too quickly, resulting in rapid aging, so the project was quickly discarded and all the energy steroids were sealed within the Tamatebako box, which the Ryugu Kingdom hid away as its national treasure to ensure that none would suffer its effects again. A more successful application of this was helping the Minks attain their Sulong forms, which similarly gave them white hair and red eyes thanks to the power of the Lunaria's homeland, the Moon, but this could only be sustained by brief periods of time. It is then, however, that a certain person emerged to offer the Lunaria a proposition, a way to accelerate the evolution of people in a far faster and more immediate way. This person was the king of the Nerona family, one of the ruling human kings at the time, who was different from the other devils, instead wanting to assist the people of the God Country into making their dreams reality. This king had an incredible touch with dealing with plants and nature, and thus suggested to make use of the photosynthetic abilities of the sun tree Eve to concentrate the extracts of bloodline elements. And through what appeared like nothing short of witchcraft, King Nironaimu was able to apply this technology to make the Eve tree give birth to fruits that contain boundless genetic possibilities, allowing for immediate evolution upon but a single bite. This creation was a truly unparalleled feat, one that would bring an even higher unprecedented age of prosperity for the people of the God Country and their allies, earning Imu's trust as one of their closest allies. So incredible was Imu's control over nature and irrigation that some began to call them the Mother of Nature, the sea Umi. However, the Lunaria eventually came to a much simpler solution for their issue of powering their technology that didn't even require the use of these fruits, to instead use the endless energy that is found all over the world. They discovered the key to solar power and solar fusion, allowing all of their creations to be infinitely powered simply through the energy of the sun. If further developed, then this technology and its wealth could then potentially be distributed across the whole world, allowing to put an end to any war for resources, leading to true world peace. The sun was far more than just a source of power. It was a symbol for the people of the kingdom. They felt that the world had been steeped in a long and dark night, a darkness spread by the devils and tyrants ruling it, and so they wanted to upturn the current corrupt system upside down and instead bring a new dawn onto this night, one that would bask all races in its warmth and allow them to live under the same sun. Thus, they began to refer to the day when they could make Nika's dreams a reality, the Day of Promise, as the day the world would be turned upside down, and the new era that would come with it as the dawn of the world. With their objective clear in sight, they understood clearly the name they wished to give their newfound alliance. They would call it the Kingdom of Deep, the Kingdom of Dawn. The sun itself became the mark of the Kingdom of Dawn, and became used by all of its allies as a symbol of union and equality under the same sun, to symbolize the ideal of building a world that was truly connected together. The tales of Nika's adventures spread far and wide, with his exploits of defeating tyrannical rulers reaching the ears of many across the world, including those of all slaves and prisoners who were oppressed. They all began to pray to Nika, begging him to deliver them liberation from their suffering. They venerated him like he was a god, he who led the gods of the God Country to bring liberation and unite all people under the same sun. the sun god Nika. With wind on their sails, those of the Kingdom of Dawn wished to proceed with making Nika's dream a reality. They wanted to do away with the borders that kept the world divided. More specifically, their goal was to destroy the Red Line and the Grand Line, and to unite all the seas of the world into one piece, which would restore the sea that was lost to legends, the All Blue. The objective of these people was to bring the destruction of the world, but not in a negative sense, rather to destroy these barriers isolating the world, to make it truly free and united, to allow people to freely sail across all the seas, and thus to allow people from all over the world to come to Nika's party. The people of Fishman Island and the God Country would lose their homes in the process, but they forged a promise that they would rebuild new settlements on the surface together for all to live united under the same sun. But to achieve such a world-destroying feat would require mighty power, and so the kingdom put to use their peerless technology and combined prowess with their allies, the shipwrights of Water 7, to build 3 colossal ships that would serve as weapons to destroy these barriers. These ships were each assigned a champion to command them, whom, blessed by the power of the Voice of All Things, a mystical advanced form of observation haki they were able to develop, would have the ability to command enormous creatures that would assist them in commanding these ships. So mighty were their powers that people christened them with the names of gods as well. First was the shogun from the Kosuke family of the Wano country, who, through the Voice of All Things, could command the colossal elephant Zunisha. He was given possession of a gigantic battleship with the power set to wipe out an entire island in one blast, hidden away beneath Wano for safekeeping. For this position, he inherited the name of the god Pluton. Second was Imu, the ruler of the Nerona family, and the one people now called Umi for their creation of the fruits. Imu had the power to command a titanic flying dragon with the Voice of All Things, and was able to thus lead a colossal starship with the power to wipe out an island in one blast. For this power, on top of their title as Mother of the Sea, they were also christened as the god Uranus. And third was the mermaid princess of the Neptune family from the Ryugu kingdom. She had the authority to command all sea kings, but her ship, the Ark Noah, was not built with the capability of destruction. Rather, it was built to help emigrate the people of Fishman Island to the surface, as when the Red Line would be destroyed, unavoidably the rubble would destroy the island beneath it. And this was a sacrifice the Seafolk were willing to make, so the people of the God Country forged a promise with them that would make their dream to coexist with humans a reality. The princess thus took her role as the god Poseidon. At last, the people of the God Country were within reach of achieving their dreams. However, right at the 11th hour, when everything seemed within grasp, betrayal struck. For some reason, the users of the fruits had found themselves completely paralyzed when in contact with water. At first, they thought this had to be some side effect, but some could not help but fear, what if it had been intentional all along? Since Imu was considered by some the sea incarnate with control over water, how come all other users were weak to it? Alas, the horrible truth was apparent. Secretly this whole time, Imu despised all those who ate the fruits, as they loathed and envied the people of the God Country, wishing the power and haven they had attained all for themselves. So in secret, Imu had been hatching a plan all along. They created these fruits to cripple the people of the Kingdom of Dawn, to make them all weak to their powers as the sea, but in the process earning their trust to become the commander of the ancient weapon Uranus. Furthermore, Imo had been secretly scheming with the rulers of another 19 human kingdoms to stage an alliance against the God Country, in a gambit to usurp their power and achieve their ultimate dream of becoming the king of the world. Offering them to make them gods just like those of the God Country, Imo rallied their 19 devils under them and blessed them with the name of Celestial Dragons, in honor of the dragons Imo could command. The people of the world quickly realized that Imo was far from a god. In fact, they were the very devil itself, just like the devils of those human kingdoms, to the point Imo came to be known as the Devil of the Sea. And so the cursed fruits they had created came to be known as the Devil Fruits, those created by the human devils who wished to control the world. Naive and trusting, the residents of this Garden of Eden, the God Country, had bitten into the forbidden fruits of the devil fruit tree Eve, tempted by the devil and falling into its trap. Driven by their greed, King Imo attained boundless power, consuming their body and mind to turn them into a monster beyond any imagination. The fears and doubts of people had taken form incarnate into this horrifying creature, becoming people's worst nightmare, giving start to a conflict for survival known as the War of Liberation. Pincered in such a Machiavellic plan, the people of the God Country were at an unavoidable disadvantage. Their Delphid users could not stand up to Imu's powers as the sea, and the humans had the advantage of numbers as well, not to mention an ancient weapon on their side. It was evident there was no time to lose, and so the kingdom's allies moved to unleash their plan into action and bring forth the destruction of the world by destroying the Red Line and the Grand Line. However, one of their allies refused to act. Despite Pluton's orders to Zunisha, who was imperial in the plans of bringing forth the destruction of the world, the elephant was terrified by the thought of unleashing such a weapon that could destroy the entire planet. He was afraid that if these powers were used in the wrong way, they could quite literally bring death to all. This would prove catastrophic, as without Zunisha, the destruction of the world could not be made a reality, as Imu possessed the other Red Line destroying weapon, and thus the dawn of the world could not be brought. This grave crime committed by Zunisha, though bearing good intentions, would spell a critical turning point in the War of Liberation. Followingly, the Mermaid Princess was killed in conflict, and at that point the kingdom understood very well the future that would await them. It was clear that the war would be lost in due time. Their chances of succeeding were slim at best, and without the three weapons by their side, the dawn of the world could not become a reality. However, legend says that these powers with the voice of all things are inherited every 800 years, so if they waited for 8 centuries again into the future, then perhaps someone could inherit these dreams and arise to lead these ancient weapons to finally destroy the world and liberate it from its tyrants. It would be a long and dark night, enveloped in the darkness under the devil's rule, but if the world could persist until then perhaps the dawn of the world could truly become a reality, and perhaps a Joy Boy may even finally appear upon this world. However, as a wise man once said, people only die when they are forgotten. So if the ideals of the Kingdom of Dawn came to be completely erased and forgotten, then the possibility of someone inheriting them would become nigh impossible. The Sea Devil would thus no doubt attempt everything to erase their existence by wiping out all traces of information about the kingdom's history, so for that reason they devised a contingency plan. They received assistance from the world-class stonemasons of the Koski clan, as thanks for having helped them liberate their country in their time, to carve down all the important information of their history onto indestructible stones. These monoliths, dubbed poneglyphs, would include information about the kingdom's ideals, the history of their kingdom, their ultimate goal of destroying the world, how to achieve that through the use of the 3 weapons, and finally, 4 red stones that would point to the nexus of their kingdom, the God Country, where they would leave behind Joy Boy's story and the truth of the world in hopes it could inspire a future generation to change the world in their place. And as a final move, the people of the Kingdom of Dawn would begin to hide their name in the form of the initials they would bear, keeping them hidden until the day when fate would begin to move its gears. True enough, the Sea Devil tried to seize these stones to ensure that no traces of their information would remain, but one of the other 20 kings, Queen of Alabasta Nefertari Lili, allowed for their dispersion across the world, which earned Imu's ire. Lili pretended this was an error on her behalf, but in truth she had been double-crossing Imu, allowing the poneglyphs to be scattered so they could someday help bring the dawn. As after all, so did Alabasta bear the symbol of the sun in their flag. Thanks to Lili's help, the poneglyphs were scattered to all allies of the kingdom to ensure their protection. Imu attempted to retrieve them, starting by assailing the city of Shandora on Jaya. The people of Shandora probably defended their land in a grueling battle, which resulted in the destruction of their city and the death of many of their people, losing a lot of the technology they brought from the moon in the process, regressing to a more primitive state. Yet in spite of this, they were able to stand their ground and defend the poneglyph, and Imu's forces had to give up on their efforts to seize it. To declare their pride, the Shandorans built a giant golden bell, hoping that their fallen comrades could hear them even from the heavens above, to relight the light of their city and the light of the dawn. Emu instead set their sights onto the Wano country, as it was found in possession of an ancient weapon, several poneglyphs, and the clan who carved them. The former Emperor Nasuzuro, who joined as one of the 19 kings that served Emu, asked for assistance in reclaiming their territory as well. However, the people of the Wano country had erected colossal walls around the country's borders to protect it from outsiders, and Shogun Kosuke enacted an isolationist policy to ensure that none would be able to enter the country and take control of either their poneglyphs or the ancient Pluton battleship, which is what made the Wano country special. This made it impossible to sail the country by sea. Emu could instead only make use of the colossal dragon they were able to command as Uranus to lay waste to the island. The dragon descended from the heavens, bringing chaos to the capital. However, a heroic green-haired, one-eyed samurai by the name of Shimotsuki Ryuma stood guard to protect his homeland. During a legendary duel that would go down in history, Ryuma swiftly decapitated the dragon over the skies of the capital of Wano, proving to the world that none should mess with its samurai, forcing the human forces to back off and leave the country alone. This legendary duel would become myth, and the dragon from said myth would in due time become a mythological fruit as well, one that Emu would eventually seize again, one day to be eaten by someone else in the distant future. However, Shogun Kosuke was not done, as he condemned Zunisha's grave crime, ordering the elephant to walk across the oceans for the next 100 years, waiting until the day of promise would arrive, to then return to Wano and open the borders of the country to unleash Pluton upon the world, this time for good. In addition, Zunisha would shelter the Ming tribe on its back alongside a road poneglyph, which gave birth to the Mokomo Dukedom, a duchy subservient to the Kosuke shogunate. Thankful for being given a home after the war, the Ming swore gratitude in a pact of brotherhood with the Kosuke clan, promising to assist them in the future whenever they may need it, to never betray them or sell them out. However, Amatsuki Toki, the daughter of one of the kingdom's allies and citizen of Wano born abroad during the war, found herself stranded far at sea. Terrified by the outcome of the conflict and hoping to see the dawn of the world with her own eyes, she used the devil-fruit powers of her Toki Toki no Mi she had eaten, which her parents had named after her, to leap 800 years into the future, to the day where she could hopefully bear witness when the world would be turned upside down. Other allies of the kingdom, such as the people of Burka or Elbaf, would follow similar isolationist policies, becoming fierce warriors to protect their lands in order to ensure their poneglyphs would not be stolen. Regardless, the 18 remaining kings, alongside Emu, seized the spoils of war and ascended to the top of the Red Line, where they brought destruction to the god country and built over it their new realm of the gods. The god land Marijua, or when translated, literally the Lady of the Sea, referring to Emu directly. The so-called celestial dragons formed a world government that would rewrite history and erase the image of devils that became associated with them, by reversing the roles they were given prior. They now made it clear to the world that they were the new gods who created this world, whereas instead the clan that bore the D name were treated by the government as devils, their natural enemies, claiming that the three weapons the ancient kingdom used were destructive tools used to try and destroy the world. However, for this narrative to be sustained, he would have to ensure that their existence as one of the weapons would remain unknown, and to avoid any others having any thoughts about bringing revolution, Emu realized it would be easier to control people if they never knew that they existed in the first place. So rather than erase their past as the Sea Devil and now to be known as a god of the world, Emu instead preferred to vanish from history altogether, and to control the world from the shadows. As such, the celestial dragons pledged their 19 swords upon the empty throne, Emu included, to trick the world into thinking that there was no king, while Emu, alongside their 5 closest commanders, used the Ope Ope no Mi to attain perennial youth and rule the world forevermore. The story of the legendary clash of ideals between the sun god Nika and the devil of the sea became nothing more than legend, and that legend became a myth. But as is the case with all mythologies, they all eventually bear fruit to a mythological zoan. The myth of Nika's existence came to take form under a special mythological type fruit, the Hitoito no Mi model Nika. There were those who wished for Nika's existence, and no matter how much the government tried to raise it, people would always yearn and dream for someone like Nika to save them. Inherited will, people's dreams, and the swell of an era, no matter how much they may attempt to erase them, these things will never cease to be, and all things that are dreamed of are born upon this world. But the same can be said for the other side of the coin. But you see, zone fruits were created with a defect. Due to the overwhelming amount of animal genetic code within them, some of them began to possess a will of their own, and so these fruits would use their will to continuously evade the world government for 800 years, until they would one day find someone suitable enough to take their powers and make their dreams become reality. It's for that very purpose that the people of the Kingdom of Dawn left behind an unbelievable treasure. And that treasure is exactly everything you've just experienced up until now. The very embodiment of all this lost history. For everything I have just told you, who is to say that it is truth or fiction? Who is to say that the adventures of this rubbery boy are the true history of this world, or nothing more than a funny story to make people laugh? Whatever they may be, there is no denying that this treasure is nothing short of the greatest story ever told. A laugh tale truly capable of uniting the entire world as one piece.